Whew. Let's see, how cold is it this morning? Come on, watch, tell me. It is 25. Everybody's going to be a little wilty this morning. I think the propane quit last night. Just a couple more days and we should be back a little bit warmer. We've got this cold front coming through right now. So everything will be a bit wilty right now because they're not happy about it being that cold in here. See you guys later, Mr. Vegetables. And the answer... The answer is there's dirt in here. That's not cool. The answer is 40%. Okay. 40%. Yep. Okay, you guys, do you want to go back in? Or are you just chilling? Literally. Texas, I'm tinkling. Okay, let's go. Beep, 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 beep. Isa, do you want to come in?
Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
We're going to talk about a couple of interesting topics today. Well, maybe not so interesting, but definitely things that
Are timely.
and affect our lives, and probably yours as well.
Yeah.
Well, first, in case you hadn't noticed, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the world. Whether it's Europe and the falderall that's going on there, or here in the U.S. or any place else, there's a lot of things going on. And the question is, how is that going to affect you? 2 years ago...
That's how it's going to affect you.
Well,
money.
It's going to affect money, but you know there's other things that it's going to affect too. Like it's going to affect the price of wheat and the price of flour around the world because Ukraine and the USSR, sorry, that's Russia. Sorry. You can tell,
Ancient history.
You can tell that I grew up in a different time. Anyway, Russia and Ukraine accounted for about 20% of the U.S. production of wheat. And that means that with probably the crops in Ukraine being damaged significantly, there's going to be a decrease in the world availability of wheat, which we anticipate means that flour and other things that use wheat are going to go up in price. But a lot of this goes back to things that happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago this month, as a matter of fact, we had just come back from a big historic recreation event, and we discovered at that time about a certain virus that was making the rounds. And looking at the data, we thought that we were going to be in for a rough ride, but definitely not as long as it's gone.
Right. Well, you know, you can never be sure what's going to happen. We understand that mutations are going to continue to happen whenever you're talking about virology or bacteria or anything else. We had a concept. We knew that it was going to disrupt transportation, production, and everything else. So at the time, our decision was to take money that we had been saving for something else and go and spend every dime to put food on the shelves that had long-term storage capabilities. We are now looking at what happens next. The price of fuel in town here has gone up.
But it's gone up $1.
Yeah, and some places it's higher than it is here. And we expect that by the time we will need to drive to Pennsylvania, assuming that nothing comes between us and that project because of some minor disaster or major disaster, diesel will be over $5 a gallon.
We'll get maybe 11 or 12.
If we're lucky. If we're going
driving.
downhill.
We get 11 or 12 if we drive between 50 and 55, and somewhere above 55, there's a big drop off in fuel economy. And the difference between 10 and 12 miles per gallon is huge when you're looking at $5.50 a gallon diesel, which we did pay several places when we're talking about in the past. Right now, I'm expecting diesel to go probably well over $6, maybe even over $7. There's going to be a certain amount of restrictions of oil imports into the U.S. That's going to be announced here fairly shortly. One of the things that I did this morning is I got online and couldn't get through to our propane company, so I called the propane company and sat on hold for about a half an hour to speak to somebody to get a new delivery of propane scheduled for our place. And that's because I know that propane is going to go up between 50 and 70% in the next week.
Right.
And I spoke with the propane company. I locked in today's price today. It's going to be delivered next Monday. But I'm expecting the price to go up before then substantially. So that's one way that we're trying to conserve our resources, our money.
Right. Well, when we saw the prices of fuel going up before this major issue, maybe 4 weeks ago or something like that, I said, take every gas can we have, go into town, and stockpile them.
And we've been doing that. I almost did it again yesterday, but I will be filling up on gas and diesel today.
Right, because waiting is simply going to mean you get less for your buck. Our problem is right now we need to produce more electricity than we can just using the solar panels. That's going to be one of our next biggest projects.
Well, actually it is our next biggest project that started yesterday. In yesterday's show, you saw that Irene and I were out there taking a fence down and moving some straw bales.
Now the temperature at that, we should mention that the air temperature was like, I don't know, 30 or something like that. But the wind chill had us solidly down in the teens.
I bought 25 solar panels in a bulk buy a few months ago. Mm-hmm. We looked ahead and said, well, the price of gas isn't going to really come down a couple of months ago, and we knew if we bought these solar panels, the solar panels would pay for themselves in about 12 or 14 months. Well, suddenly that's changed. Mm-hmm. I did buy some rough sawn lumber a few weeks ago, and that's going to form the basis of a temporary ground mount for 12 of our solar panels.
Right.
And that will give us another 3,000 watts going into our utility building, which doubles the amount of power that we have going into our batteries.
Right, so we're hoping that what this means is that instead of, for instance, running a small propane heater in the greenhouse, I might be able to run a little electric heater in the greenhouse. We're getting to the point where we almost don't need it at night, but there's still going to be times when we do. And we're also getting to the point where we're going to be needing to run more heat mats for seed starting. So we're in a kind of a rough time of the year where we frequently get clouds and storms coming through, which impact our ability to create solar energy. But we need that energy because we're still too cold. Fortunately, our house is mostly passive solar. So when we do get sun, this place gets toasty. And we will open up all the windows on the south side and just roast this place during the day. Just roast it, get it as hot as we can get it. And then as soon as the sun starts to go down in the evening, we close up the blinds, the drapes. When we used to boondock in our RV.
Boondocking, we would go and not hook up to water or sewer or electric, and we were self-contained. And it was self-contained with a small tank of water, a small black tank for the toilet, and a couple of golf cart batteries. And we learned to really take care of those batteries and save as much energy as possible. We used the smallest amount of lighting that we could. Everything that we did was focused on energy preservation, whether it was propane, electric, didn't matter.
Right. So for instance, with the RVs, at that time, it made sense to rely on propane for the refrigerator, because propane with a refrigerator didn't suck any juice out of your batteries, because our battery was our weakest link, because they didn't have the cool, neat batteries now. These were a couple of golf cart batteries that ran the whole thing. We learned a lot about conservation back then. And one of the things we learned was, if it's either hot or cold, you put up shades on the windows that are insulated. You have to have a plan.
Things are going to change once we get the temporary installation of some solar panels in. And how is that going to change? Well, the primary power generation for those solar panels will be between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So we'll try to do as many of our heavy electrical drains between those hours so that we don't draw down the batteries. We have about 16 kilowatt hours of batteries in the utility building. We may increase that, but in general, we think that the amount of solar panels that we're about to add is going to make a huge difference about how we operate. We'll use more electrical appliances because propane is going to be really expensive. Right now it's expensive enough, but it's going to go up even more, anywhere between 50 and 70% in the next week, which is a huge increase. If you're paying $3.50 a gallon for propane and you're now looking at paying $5 or $6 a gallon for propane, that becomes
stock up if you can.
Becomes very, very expensive. So we'll be moving more towards using more electrical appliances in preference to the gas appliances.
And this is the antithesis of what we've been doing for 20 years. Because always before, propane was inexpensive, and it was a commodity that we could easily access, and just, it would work, you know? Now we're looking at the fact that maybe instead of firing up the small oven when we want to reheat pizza, we'll get a countertop toaster oven.
How has our energy system changed over the past 17 years? We've been here on site, living off-grid for 17 years. 17 years ago, we had about 800 watts of solar panels. That's all I could afford at the time. We had some golf cart battery equivalents, which meant we didn't have a whole lot of energy storage. And gas was still an issue, but we did have some generators that we can run, and we did run them. Over the time, we've added solar panels to our system, we've added battery capacity, and last year, the year before, I upgraded the electric system for the house so that we're running at a different voltage for batteries. We have more energy efficiency in the system and more capacity. That change has happened over 17 years. First we had a small amount, then we had a little bit more, then we had a little bit more, and we had a little bit more. Same with batteries. A few months ago, we had an opportunity to buy a large quantity of solar panels. They were used. They've been used probably for 4 or 5 years in a commercial installation. They still have probably 10 or 15 years worth of life in them, but I was able to buy them cheap. So we bought a large quantity. Now the issue is, how do we put them up? Most people will go use iron pipe and all kinds of fancy mounting hardware, and they'll spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to mount $1,000 worth of panels. We're doing something different, and we'll show you more of that probably tomorrow's show and why we're doing it.
Right. This will be a two-phase project. One
or more.
One of them really 27 phase project. The first is just getting something in place so that we can dramatically reduce our cost for energy. Because right now, with gasoline for the generators going, and we do have generators that we use propane, but propane is going up faster than gas is, so that doesn't make any sense. Long term, we're going to do something different, which is going to solve some of our other problems too, but that'll be a bigger project. So we need something quick first.
So we hope this was of interest to you. Definitely, if you're a big consumer of propane, today's the time to get your propane tanks
right
filled.
and rethink things. I mean, some places electricity is very inexpensive because of hydropower or some other source. You need to take a look at where you live and figure out what your least expensive mode of operation is going to be.
So really take a look at what you're using. Now, there's one thing that I have to caution you about. If you're going to store gasoline, you absolutely need to put gasoline stabilizer in it, fuel stabilizer in it, because it has volatiles that are going to come out. You want to keep the opportunity from varnish from really presenting itself and gumming up the works. Yeah, you can use the gas for a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months without it. But if you're thinking about storing it long term, think about a fuel preservative. And the other thing is, be aware of where it's safe for you to store gasoline. Diesel is a different story. You have issues of algae growth that could happen, which means if you're going to store diesel for a long term, you need to have the biocide that goes into the fuel tank so that it's not going to gum up. Different mixtures of diesel are available at different times of year. One will create gelling in the cold, the other one won't. You have to look at your area yourself. Propane is propane, natural gas is natural gas. They both have really good qualities and really bad qualities. The really bad quality is price.
You just need to look at whatever you're using as a source of energy. Are there things that you can do, like putting drapes on the windows, to make it warmer or cooler depending on where you live? Can you change your habits at all? We always tend to run, like I know people who will run the dryer overnight. Some places your power is cheaper at certain times of the day.
You know what time it is?
It is. It's time for people to tell, time for us to tell people.
So let's try this again.
Let's try this again, yes. It's time for people to start brainstorming. They need to look at their own circumstances. They need to look at their own power sources. If we lived on the property we used to have up in Maine, we would be using an external boiler, using our own wood to heat the house, and a wood stove. That's what we'd be doing. That's what makes sense in that environment.
The solar makes perfect sense here.
Huge.
If you're someplace else where you have the rights to harness a small stream or the ability to put a hydro station into a river, which you may be able to do, that's another story.
Right. You have to know the rules of your own state. You can harness the wind. You can harness the sun.
Say goodbye, Irene.
So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously we're going to be doing a ton of stuff. We've got so much going on. So much.
Too much. It'll all get done eventually.
Yeah. Or we'll just say, oh, well, and move on, because sometimes that's all you can do. So until next time. Bye.
Bye. Keep brainstorming.
Yeah, definitely.